Robert Sarver, the owner of the NBA team, the Phoenix Suns, and its WNBA counterpart, the Phoenix Mercury, has been suspended from the league for 1 year. He's also been fined $10 million. Those are the consequences for him after an investigation into his 18-month tenure that found that his conduct at times clearly violated workplace standards. In addition to borderline bullying employees, the investigation found that Sarver, on at least 5 occasions, used the N-word. The report includes a specific note that his use of the N-word was while he was recounting the statements of other people, as if that makes it any better. It also found that Sarver made many sex-related comments and inappropriate remarks about the appearance of women. And despite these findings, the independent report specified investigators did not determine that Sarver's misconduct was, quote, motivated by racial and gender-based animus. Sarver has issued a response to the investigation. It reads in part, while I disagree with some of the particulars of the NBA's report, I would like to apologize for my words and actions that offended our employees. Joining me now to discuss is Bally Sports Network analyst Scoop B. Johnson and MSNBC legal analyst and criminal defense attorney, my favorite defense attorney, Danny Svallo. So Scoop, what's your reaction to this report? This isn't the first time an NBA owner has been caught up in allegations of racism and sexism.
Feels like Donald Sterling Part 2, 2.0. Some of my NBA counterparts have expressed to me. I think what makes it a little different is the fact that Sterling was caught on audio. Comparatively, you look at Sarver, its account and stories that have been mentioned about this. And I think that's where it differs. And I think that's where the NBA likely told the line between a 1-game suspension or 1 year suspension, rather, and $10 million versus ban for life.
Scoop, do you think that matters? Because sometimes when there are allegations of racism, I feel like one of the things that makes it different than allegations of something else is that the evidence is the testimony of the person, right? Like, this thing happened to me, and here's the evidence of that. And often that is not going to be recorded. Do you think it matters ultimately, like in the bigger picture, that there's a recording? Or should these accounts, 5 times using the N-word, that means that they had to interview a lot of people to corroborate the fact that he used that word 5 times. So does it matter that there's no backup or recording if there's so many witness accounts?
5 times is 6 times too many, because I say 6 because you thought about it before you said it. And so I just want to go on record as saying that it's wrong either way. It's particularly the climate that we're in with women's rights, which should always have been a thing of equal value, but also the fact that we are in 2022 and we're kind of reliving some of the things that we saw in 2020 creeping back up on us and beyond. So I think either way, once it's mentioned and once you're put into that account, I think he should have been punished. I don't want to make light of it. I think there should have been a harsher punishment. And this was one of the worst kept secrets in the NBA. I can say I remember before the investigation started, I think it started in like October of last year. I was hearing about the rumblings of the findings back in August and maybe September. And it was bad from the way that everybody had illustrated it to me. So, legally, I'm sure that my counterpart can say a little bit more, but I think ethically and just socially, it's irresponsible for Mr. Sarver to have expressed himself that way. And behind the scenes, he felt that punishment was kind of harsh.
So let's talk about the legal piece, Danny. So the suspension means that he can't be present for any team games and he can't be present in the facility for any practices. But are there any other potential consequences that he could face in this particular case?
Theoretically, yes. It's really up to the league and whatever Sarver agreed to when he paid for the privilege of joining this league. He doesn't get due process. He doesn't get a trial on these suspensions. This is a private company that decides how to discipline within the company. Now, does it seem insane that the multimillionaire owner of a team cannot go to his own team's facilities for meetings? Yes, it does. But that is the system, the mini jurisdiction judicial system that the league has set up for its owners. So that is acceptable. He doesn't get to claim unconstitutionality or something like that. And I really urge everybody, this report's available online. The law firm that conducted it is one of the most prestigious firms in the entire country. You may remember that from your law school, Zerlina. Wachtell Lipton is one of the heaviest hitters in the country. So this report is no joke. And I got to tell you, we talk about the use of the N-word. As horrible as that is, I think that's tied for first place with about 11 other different ridiculous things that are in that report. So it's worth a read. It's pretty shocking all the way around.
It's such a good point about Wachtell Lipton. I literally said that out loud when I read the reporting because I was like, oh, that's the firm that we all apply to when we're getting out of law school.
They're good. I believe whatever they say.
Right. We all everybody wants to work there.
Right.
But Danny, one quick follow-up point. This investigation involved 320 current and former employees, the evaluation of more than 80,000 documents, including emails, text messages, and videos. That feels like a lot of evidence. That's a lot of documentation of your alleged misconduct. And you mentioned the N-word. I have been called the N-word maybe 2 times in my entire life. That is not the way racism and microaggressions manifest in real life. Can you speak to the fact that this is the amount of evidence that was necessary to hold someone accountable for this conduct? Is that the norm, even in the legal context, Danny?
Yeah, sorry to peek behind the curtain, too, but keep in mind this report is conducted by a firm that bills at about $1,000 an hour. So everybody's making a lot of money on this very detailed report. So thousands of documents, thousands upon thousands of emails. I believe it. They had to get to the bottom of it, and it was very profitable for them to do so. But look, emails don't lie. Documents, we live in an era where text messages live forever if you know where to look for them. Documents don't lie. So it's a lot easier to conduct this kind of investigation. When you read this report, and I encourage anyone, go online and read this report. What's shocking isn't so much the use of the N-word, which is shocking. It's the additional part that it was done at work. Why would you take that chance? As hilarious as you may think a joke is, or as ridiculous as you may be relaying what somebody else said, why do it at work? I mean, and that is one of the most compelling things about this report, that all of this bad behavior, and again, use of the N-word is, in my opinion, tied among a lot of other outrageous things. One example is supposedly he was walking towards the shower and said something about his anatomy to women, ladies and gentlemen that were having a meeting. It's crazy, and it's bonkers. That's a legal term. It's Latin, and it's bonkers.
It is bonkers, Danny. And I think that's why Me Too trended worldwide, because women have a story like that. All of us do. Scoop, one of the things that I've been thinking about also is Brittany Griner in this particular moment, because she had to go overseas because women don't get paid as much to play basketball here in the United States as the men do. And we know that in addition to not paying the WNBA players as well as the NBA players, Robert Sarver created a hostile work environment for Black female employees. I mean, what does it say about his ability to lead a team like the Phoenix Mercury in that context?
Great minds think alike. I was thinking the same thing when the report came down, particularly because, as you mentioned, Griner is a member of the Mercury. When I look at this situation, I think it's not just a Sarver issue as it relates to inequality, though. It is a WNBA issue. And I remember I was just having this conversation with someone the other day as it relates to just the amenities or the accoutrement, if you will, that NBA players make or get in comparison to WNBA players, namely, the fact that WNBA players don't fly private and they do have to fly commercial. And for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, even flying coach. I don't know about you. I'm 6'5". I have trouble myself flying coach. And so for women who might be my height or taller, 6'8", 6'9", and what have you, after a big game and your knees and your ligaments and some of the other things, that is an issue. But I think it is coincidental that Robert Sarver is the owner co-jointly of both the Mercury and the Suns. And it's interesting because when you look at free agency this summer, it was widely rumored that Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets was looking to potentially be traded to the Phoenix Suns. And so, you saw a lot of chatter on Twitter. Is this the team KD really wants to go to, specifically because he is so pro-black, pro-equality, both he and his Nets teammate, Kyrie Irving. And so it's interesting how it would have looked, the optics of it, had he been traded to the Phoenix Suns this offseason. But I mean, this is something that has been discussed amongst many of players, owners, and what have you. It's, like I said, one of the worst kept secrets. And I think that in this case, again, I do think that 1 year is a bit light. And I know that a lot of my other counterparts have, been verbal about the fact that that punishment should be longer. And in fact, many people feel as though he should be forced to sell the team, just like Donald Sterling was. But I still go back to what I said. I think the optics and the audio with Sterling to some makes the biggest difference.
Well, I'll make sure to tape the next time somebody says something racist or there's a microaggression, I suppose. Brandon Scoop Robinson and Danny Ceballos, thank you so much for your analysis. It's a fascinating conversation, but really, really important. So many people have this experience. Thank you again, and please stay safe.